third and concluding airing of a wide-ranging talk between Reverend C.T. Vivian, Dr. Joy Leary, Randall Robinson, and also joined by the Reverend Johnny Ray Youngblood, who is the pastor of Brooklyn's St. Paul's Community Baptist Church, where this taping was done. It was done on September 23rd, amidst the church's annual Ma'afa, that commemorates the terror of the Middle Passage and slavery, and offers the opportunity of healing. Among many issues explored was the historic role of black ministers. Reverend C.T. Vivian singled out Dr. King.
You raised something about the role of the pastor, and it made me think about Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. And where does he fit into this? You say that Martin was the greatest symbol.
Oh, it would be on down.
Where does Malcolm fit into this?
You see, you asked me, and I just one question. And now we really get into, and in New York, when you ask this question, you get in problems. But the point is, what did he do?
I see. You have nothing to offer in that way.
See, my point being is, for anything you can mention, I can give you 10 that Martin did. All right? You see, when you talk about changing the society, creating a new dynamic upon which any religion can operate, right? Any religion, right? Then you are talking about the role of the prophet is to put a society back on track. The role of a society is so reach the conscience of the nation that it changes the mass of people in a new direction, right? Now, the point is, those things did not happen. When you look at Martin created a new method that was based upon his Savior's understanding, nonviolent direct action, right? But you got to suffer for that, you see, all right? You can't just say, I'm going to shoot you and you shoot me, right? That's an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. That's several thousand years ago. We're still fighting 16th century problems and 9th century problems, BC, in the 21st century because of those attitudes. Martin changed all that, right?
Martin,
yeah.
Let me ask you a question
yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Because I think what they did would have to be seen as, in many ways, compatible, and I think
Yes.
it's very thoughtful. So.
Okay, yeah, and this
let
was
me
in
finish
New York.
that
Yeah,
point.
please finish it.
When one asks the question, what did Malcolm do? I don't think he did anything that produced the tactical results that King did. But he did some things that produced, for young, battered black psyches like mine,
Absolutely.
some interior renovation that cannot be overvalued.
I agree.
Because he helped to produce my manhood.
Absolutely.
You see, because what the price was in the civil rights movement to tell us nonviolence was a good thing. I understood that practically. To say that we had to love those who were doing awful things to us in the South, and I understood that tactically, intellectually. But psychologically, I didn't understand it at all.
We struggle often with dichotomies. It's either or, and it's not either
That's
or.
absolutely.
It's
That
and.
should be that way.
It's and I think that has been one of the methods and approaches that has continued to divide us. There can be a Malcolm and there can be a Martin, and there hopefully are a whole lot more, and that is okay for that to be. And that consciousness that Malcolm raised, a sense of self-efficacy and a sense of justice, which is not the antithesis of our spiritual reality. It is not counter to the will of God in terms of that which is just, true, fair, kind, pure. Those things are not in conflict. And I think that it's very important that we demonstrate, particularly to young people, that it need not be something divisive.
Let me say that as a pastor, particularly at this point, I count it an honor to pastor a congregation where we honor Malcolm on his birthday. Because also we honor Adam Clayton Powell, who was a Christian and who also had his issues with Dr. King. And naturally we honor Dr. King. I just think, in the words of Wyatt Walker, we honor him on the wrong day. We honor him on his birthday, and we should honor him April 4th, which helps to dramatize the nation's shame. My contention is that Dr. King, in a word, did not speak to us, but he spoke for us, but he spoke in the language of the hearers. Malcolm, as young people say now, represented us. See, when Dr. King started talking about nullification and interposition, I didn't even know those words existed. But I didn't have to know because of who he was talking to. He had to use that language. So there was a way he was translated. He spoke for us, but not always to us, because we needed those who were our oppressors to hear what we were saying. And in order to get them to hear, just like on the day of Pentecost, he had to speak in the language of the hearers. I think that also what happened, because we are always getting this dichotomy placed before us, choose Malcolm or Martin. I think those who placed the dichotomy there had to make a choice.
Tonight, Emmy winners
I remember a young man, a youth thing. I remember a young man in Cincinnati, right? He was about halfway back in the crowd. He jumped up in the middle of the audience, and I was nonviolent, of course, you see what I mean? So he was going to challenge that. And so he said, what we need to do is run out here and knock out the windows and do this and do that and do that. And so I said, let's do that. You go do that tonight, right? Let's experiment with what you're talking about so we can get past your language to, in fact, an action so we can see what that means, right? And then I said, you know, and remember, if you actually do that, right, and if you got so little that, and I know you're not going to do it because you stood up here in the middle of an audience and said you were going to, right? And I know they're going to get you, and you know that too, but furthermore, you're not going to do it, right? Now, the point being is that if we're talking about letting off a certain kind of anger, right, fine, I have no problem with that. The point is, if you're talking about winning, if you're talking about getting results, if you're talking about freeing people, if you're talking about liberating, all right, you have to be about more than anger, right?
No one quarrels.
Yeah, okay, but you understand what I'm saying?
You understand.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying.
But at the same time, you do understand what impediments that Dr. King ran up against when he stopped talking just about public accommodations, began to talk about economic justice.
Oh, wait a minute, but only after he'd won. You see,
After he'd won
well, let me
one
tell you.
thing.
Oh, no, three things, three major things, all right? First was public accommodation, right? Then, in terms of the Civil Rights Bill, right? But you also had the Voting Rights Bill.
Now, when I said one thing, I was thinking about it conceptually.
Right.
No, I know, but what I'm
that
trying
would
to get...
incorporate all of those, encompass all those things.
No,
but I'm saying that
you can't say that, though. You
No,
see,
it-
there was
it-
a
it-
difference. See,
Let's move.
You started this, Gil.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my fault.
right. Well,
There was
you can
something.
edit all you need.
That's exactly right. You got a chance to edit.
There was something, though, that you touched on, and you have continually touched on, Dr. Lewis, and that is that there's something in our emotional DNA that dwells within us that makes us behave and misbehave and be active and inactive. And I was just wondering if you could just give us a snapshot of what you have been saying in that regard.
Much of what in my work is, of course, around the notion of post-traumatic slave syndrome, which far be it from anything that's trying to yet another label, but really try to understand the condition that we find ourselves in and to figure out ways to extricate ourselves from it. We cannot change what we do not understand. And sometimes we swallow whole, and we have consistently swallowed whole, things about who we are and what we are. Things around, I mean, just, it continues, as a matter of fact, genetic inferiority, for example. Consistently telling children that they are, you know, underachieving, they're not making the benchmarks, they're incapable. These are the words and these are the images that are flashed before us, and they have been. This is nothing new. Shockley, Jensen, everyone's tried to, and after a while, people begin to believe that. They begin to believe those things about themselves, and while they may not say that out loud, it is somewhere in there lingering in our consciousness about what's wrong with me, okay? And when someone has to define that for you, when you look at, you know, it's not plausible that you could have 300 years of slavery, of traumas, and it leave no scar, no remnants.
That's right.
It's not plausible.
No.
And yet, if you raise the issue ever, you know, once again, these kinds of issues, then everyone's, well, oh, you know, you're trying to find an excuse, get over it. Well, I'd get over it if it would get over. It's never ended. And so, at the same time, we ourselves, you know, it's like people will ask me things, and this conversation reminds me of it. Well, what about what Bill Cosby said?
And we want you to know, gentlemen, that every one of you, see, we know your badge numbers, we know your names.
In mid-February, Reverend C.T. Vivian, an SCLC organizer, confronted Sheriff Clark and his deputies on the courthouse steps.
But believe me, there were those that followed Hitler, like you blindly follow this Sheriff Clark, who didn't think their day would come. But they also were pulled into the courtrooms, and they were also given their death sentences. You are not this bad a racist, but you're a racist in the same way that Hitler was a racist. And you're blindly following a man that's leading you down a road that's going to bring you into federal court. Now, I am representing people in Dallas County, and I have that right to do so. Now, and as I represent them, and they can speak for themselves, is what I'm saying true? Yes. Is it what you think and what you believe? Yes. For this is not a local problem, gentlemen. This is a national problem. You can't keep anyone in the United States from voting without hurting the rights of all other citizens. Democracy's built on this. This is why every man has the right to vote, regardless.
And he started shouting at me that I was a Hitler, I was a brute, that I was a Nazi. I don't remember everything he called me. And I did lose my temper then.
And we have come to be here because they are registering at this time.
Turn that light out. And we have come to register. I can't enforce the law with the light in my face.
We have come to register. And this is our reason for being here. We're not
You're blinding me with that light.
We're not
Move back.
Well, no, you can arrest us. You can arrest me. Don't keep that man. You don't keep that man out. You want to arrest us, arrest us. You don't have to beat us. No, you don't have to beat us.
I don't remember even hitting him, but I went to the doctor and got an x-ray and found out I had a linear fracture and a finger on my left hand.
With Jim Clark, it was a clear engagement between the forces of movement and the forces of the structure that would destroy movement. It was a clear engagement between those who wished the fullness of their personalities to be met and those that would destroy us physically and psychologically. You do not walk away from that. This is what movement meant. Movement meant that finally we were encountering on a mass scale the evil that had been destroying us on a mass scale. You do not walk away from that. You continue to answer it.
If we're wrong, why don't you arrest us?
Why don't you get out in front of the camera and go on?
It's not a matter of being in front of the camera. It's a matter of facing your sheriff and facing your judge. We're willing to be beaten for democracy. And you misuse democracy in the street. You beat people bloody in order that they will not have the privilege to vote. You beat me in the side and then hide your blows. No, I don't need to leave. We have come to register to vote.
You're under arrest.
Hey, everybody under arrest! Let them all go! You want to arrest me? willing to be beaten for democracy. We're 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 willing to be beaten for We're willing to be beaten for democracy.